Hey guys, I hope you're doing well out there. Got my tea, got my CBD cigarette and we're going to talk about the Iran-Israel war. So, I don't know, everybody, except if you're living under a rock, is privy to the fact that Iran and Iraq have been trading blows. So, we're going to talk about what's been going on most recently, the history between these two nations, and my analysis. That's what you can expect to get out of this video. Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is basically the UN organization that oversees, nuclear weaponry, has issued Iran as not compliant with, the amount of uranium that's been enriched at the levels that's under the agreements that they've signed into, right? The non-proliferation agreement. They found that Iran was in violation. Okay, now Trump had given the Iranians 60 days to make a deal, and after the 61st day, Israel struck. Israel had taken out the general of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with 5 other generals, about 9 scientists, 9 of their top nuclear scientists. It killed about 78 civilians, wounded a few hundred more. So it was a pretty targeted attack. Minimal. There's one. Civilian is too many, but it's war and it's a bomb, and unfortunately, but thankfully, it was only held to 78. It could have been more. They also hit one of Iran's gas fields. One of their big exporter of natural gas. They hit a nuclear reactor laboratory. They also hit one of their nuclear sites. So they also struck military sites, right, by killing the leader of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So they basically they struck infrastructure like military and energy, right? They want to damage their economy by doing that. Now, of course, the U.S. says they had nothing to do with it, which I think was just a head fake. It was a feint by Trump to make the Iranians not think that there was ever going to be a strike, and then, of course, Israel hit them. Now, it's important to understand Iran's biggest defense is their ballistic missiles. All right, they're estimated to have about 2,000 to 3,000 of them. They're very difficult to shoot down. Their drones are a lot easier, but the ballistic missiles are where Iran really has. That's their biggest weapon in their arsenal. So they struck Israel back in 5 waves. They killed, I think, 12 people, injured a few hundred. Some of those missiles did get through the Iron Dome and David Sling and others. Which the Israelis are not, they're not delusional. They know that the air missile defense systems are never going to be 100%. Okay, so Israel's just struck back, and we're going to see how much damage they do. So, now, during the aftermath of October 7th, Israel has hit the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, killed some generals. Iran fired back, and a few months later, Israel fired on Iran and took out a lot of their air missile defense systems. Then Iran struck back, didn't really do much damage. There was a coalition of countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, obviously America, Britain, that helped to shoot down a lot of the incoming missiles. All right, so that's what's been happening recently. Okay, now historically, Iran actually was friends with Israel up until 1979, when Iran had what was called the Islamic Revolution, which overthrew the Shah, who was very pro-West. He was, he was very corrupt and lavish and extravagant and hated by his people, but he was pro-Western, and Iran was a lot more of an open society back then. I'm not saying the Shah was far from it, but he was pro-Western, and Iran was much more of an open society. So they had a revolution. Now they're ruled by a theocracy. They're ruled by the Ayatollah, who, in their religion, he basically is ruling by divine will. As soon as that happened, there was an Iranian hostage crisis with some American students. They had stormed the American embassy, and they severed ties with Israel. They declared Israel and the United States as enemies, and they've been at a gridlock ever since. Now, it's important to understand who the Iranians are, because they're vastly different people than anybody else in the Middle East, both linguistically and culturally. Their heritage goes back to the Persian Empire. Right? There were many different dynasties. You have the Safavids, you have the Sasanians, you have the Medes, right? Just to name a few. Now, the Persians are ancient, right? They controlled half the world at one point. They had a huge empire. They've been around for thousands of years. They worshipped a religion called Zoroastrianism, where Ahura Mazda was their god. They really were the progenitors of the ideas of duality, of a dualistic world view where there's good and bad, light and dark. They had fire temples where they would worship their god, and many Iranian holidays that are Zoroastrian are still celebrated by the population at whole. I think there's one like Nowruz, which is their New Year. Also, I forget the name of the holiday, but it's where they make a fire and you jump over the fire, and that's symbolic for going in from dark to light, I believe. Now, so they have a religion and a culture that predates Islam. Islam came around in, the mid 6th century AD. Okay, Zoroastrianism is older than Christianity. It's probably on par with as old as Judaism. I'm not sure the exact age, but now the Arabs, on the other hand, and the Iranians speak Farsi, which is an Indo-Aryan language. The name Iran actually means land of the Aryans. Okay. The Arabs, on the other hand, speak Arabic. Obviously, they come from Arabia. They migrated north and west upon the expansion of Islam. They were expanding Islam with an empire, and they took over Egypt. They took over Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, North Africa, even parts of Europe at one point, right? Spain, southern France, Portugal, southern Italy. So, even though they come from Arabia, a lot of people call themselves Arabs in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, because the Arabs not only forcefully converted people to Islam, but they really Arabicized a lot of the nations that they conquered. For instance, or enculturated people with Islam, with Arabism, Arab culture. Like, for instance, Egypt. The ancient Egyptians were not speaking Arabic. They would have never regarded themselves as Arabs. They were writing in hieroglyphics, right? They were not speaking or writing in Arabic. They would have not had an Arab identity. Um, so the real identity of these people also changed as well, with the exception of very few things, very very small remnants of people that held on to their pre-Islamic, pre-Arab identity. Some can be, you can look at the Assyrians in Iraq, or the Chaldeans, um, the Jews, obviously, and the Iranians. The Iranians paid a big price to preserve their heritage, right? They have a book called Shahnameh, which translates into King of Kings, written by an author called Ferdowsi, which is all about, you know, ancient Iranian poems and folklores that predated the Islamic invasion. Okay, so a lot of these other countries really don't know what their true identity is. Syria, there were people like the Arameans, there were the Hittites, there were, you know, other, Near Eastern Semitic people that were living there far before when the Arabs got there. In Lebanon, you had the Phoenicians, and Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia, you have the Berbers. So you have, the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians in Iraq, and the Assyrians as well. And, in Jordan, you had the Edomites, you had the Ammonites, you had the Moabites, right? And then there were, the Nabateans, and later the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids, which were Arabs that migrated northward. But my point is that the Persians have paid a huge cost. They've incurred a huge cost to hold on to their pre-Islamic identity, although they have been converted to Islam. Unlike all these other countries, which just call themselves Arabs, they don't even know. Most Syrians don't know that they come from Arameans or Hittites or other Semitic grouping speaking people. Most Babylonians don't even identify as the descendants of the Babylonians or the Akkadians or the Sumerians, the Chaldeans, right? Very few. So the relationship, okay, how did Iran become Muslim? There was, the Arabs were, so at the time, we're talking about 630 AD, right? The Persians and the Romans were the two biggest empires at the time. And they were fighting with each other. And so, when you fight with each other, you weaken each other. So there was an opportunity for the Arabs to come in there and take certain territories that belonged to each respective empire. Syria, Egypt, Palestine / Israel, and Iraq. Okay? So they took these territories, they conquered these territories, their numbers were growing, and they sent the caliph, which means leader, sent a letter to the Persian king at the time, was named Yazdegerd III, inviting him to accept Islam, and basically in a very menacing but ostensibly benevolent way, but feigning a threat, said that your nation will come to ruin if you don't accept Islam. So the king of the Persians responded, and I'm going to read you. What the letter says, because this is truly what the Persians think of the Arabs. Now, in the name of Ahura Mazda, creator of life and intelligence, You in your letter wrote that you want to direct us towards your God, Allahu Akbar, without having the true knowledge of who we are and what we do worship. It is amazing that you occupy the position of caliph, ruler of Arabs, yet your knowledge is the same as a lowly Arab rambler, roaming in deserts of Arabia, and same as a desert tribal man. Little man, you offer me to worship a united and single God without knowing that it has been thousands of years that Persians worship the mono God, and they pray to God 5 times a day. In this land of culture and art, this has been the normal path of life for years. When we establish the tradition of hospitality and good deeds in the world, and we wave the flag of good thoughts, good words, good deeds in our hands, you and your ancestors were roaming the deserts, eating lizards, for you had nothing else to feed yourselves, and burying your innocent daughters alive, an old Arab tradition, because they preferred male children to female. Arab people have no value for God's creatures. You behead God's children, even the prisoners of war, rape women, bury your daughters alive. You attack caravans, mass murder, kidnap people's wives, and steal their property. Your hearts are made of stone. We condemn all these evil which you do. How can you teach us godly ways when you commit these actions? You tell me to stop my fire worship. Us Persians see the love of Creator and power of Inventor in the light of sun and warmth of fire. Lights and warmth of the sun and fire makes us see the light of truth and warms our hearts to the Creator and to one another. It helps us to be kind to one another. It enlightens us and makes us to keep Mazda's flame alive in our hearts. Our Lord is Ahura Mazda, and it is strange that you people also just discovered God and renamed God Allahu Akbar. But we are not the same as you. We are not in the same level as you. We help other human beings. We spread love among humanity. We spread good throughout the earth. We have been spreading our culture, but in respect for other cultures throughout the whole world for thousands of years. Yet in the name of Allah, invader other men's land, you mass murder the people, create famine, fear, and poverty for others. You create evil in the name of Allah, who is responsible for this catastrophe. Is it Allah who commands you to murder, pillage, and to destroy? Is it you, the followers of Allah, who do this in His name, or is it both? You have risen from the heat of the deserts and burnt out infernal lands with no resources. You want to teach people the love of God by your military campaigns and the power of your swords. You are desert savages. Yet you want to teach urban people like us who lived in the cities for thousands of years the love of God. We have thousands of years of culture behind us, a powerful tool indeed. Tell us, with all your military campaigns, barbarism, murder, and pillage of the name of Allahu Akbar, what have you taught to this Muslim army? What knowledge have you taught the Muslim that you also insist on teaching it to non-Muslims? What culture have you learned from your Allah, now that you want to force teach it to others? Alas, oh alas, that today our Persian armies of Ahura have been defeated from your recently Allah-worshipping armies. Now our people have to worship the same God, the same 5 times a day, but forced by the sword to call God and Allah and pray to God in Arabic, because your Allah only understands Arabic. I suggest you and your gang of bandits pack up and move back to your deserts where they are used to living. Take them back where they used to be, where they're used to the burning heat of the sun, tribal life, eating lizards, and drinking camel milk. I forbid you to let your band of thieves loose in our fertile land, civilized cities, and our glorious nation. Don't turn these beasts with hearts of stone loose to mass murder our people, kidnap our women, children, rape our wives, and send our daughters to Mecca as slaves. Don't let them do these crimes in the name of Allahu Akbar. Put a stop to your criminal behavior. Aryans are forgiving, warm, hospitable, and decent people, and everywhere they went, they have spread seeds of friendship, love, knowledge, and truth. Therefore, they shall not punish you and your people for your pirate ways and criminal acts. I beg you to remain with your Allahu Akbar in your deserts and do not move close to our civilized cities, for your believers are much fearful, and your behavior is most barbaric. Signed, Yazgird III, Sassanid Empire. I know that was a long letter, but I hope you guys understand that this was the attitude of the Persian people to not only the Arabs, but to Islam, okay? And, many Iranians have a very vast understanding of their history. And, that's why it's very common to see Iranians, when they move to this country, completely disavow not only the regime, but Islam itself. They're very open and willing to adapt and assimilate into Western society. Now, let's talk about the relationship now, and just to finish it, the Arabs ended up winning. Okay, they won that battle. It was called the Battle of Qadisiyah, if you want to look it up, Qadisiyah, and the Persians were forced to convert to Islam. All right, so they're and when you talk to them, because you say, well, why are they Muslim now? Why would they believe in this? When you talk to them, a lot of them will admit that yes, we know we were forcefully converted. Now, the relationship with the Jews, or the nation of Israel, is very interesting. The Jews were exiled into Babylonian captivity, and when the Persians conquered the Babylonians under King Cyrus, they actually liberated the Jews and allowed them to go back to the land of Israel and rebuild the Holy Temple. Okay, now also in the Iran-Iraq War in 1989 to 1990, Israel was arming the Iranians against the Iraqis and training their pilots how to use, how to drop bombs on them. Now, neither country will admit this, but if you look this up, it's very easy to find. Now, I personally think that what Israel's doing is heroic. I think it's much needed. I think that the regime in Iran must fall. I think that they want regime change, and I think regime change will be good for the entire world. There's been many protests in the past, and they've violently put them down. Iran is a very repressive country. Women can't walk around. They have to have a hijab on. There's no real freedom of expression. I mean, they're not even allowed to walk their dogs. It's not a lie. Like, you can look it up. Like, they're not allowed to walk dogs. Like, that's the civilization that they're living in. So if they're not even allowed to walk a fucking dog down the streets of Tehran, imagine what else they're not allowed to do. So you have women who are, they have religious police who will physically beat a woman if she's not dressed properly. So, they have regressed greatly from, which was a great civilization to, this. So I've always made the argument that, the Iranians have not been in captivity since 1979. They've been in captivity since 631 AD. Okay? Iran must leave Islam. Israel is not the enemy of Iran. The enemy of Iran is exactly who's in that letter. And the enemy of Israel and America and Europe and the West is who Yazdigerd wrote about in that letter. It is Islam. It is the Islamic world and the way that they are conducting themselves right now. That is who the Iranians should be at war with. Because the Ayatollah claims descendant from Prophet Muhammad, which would mean that he's not even really Iranian, he's an Arab. or at least has Arab in him. So what Israel's doing is they're targeting the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That's like those are basically a special unit of soldiers to protect the regime, which are separate from the regular army. And I think that Israel's doing that because they want to create internal division, and hopefully what they really want, even Netanyahu has said this many times, is that he's been encouraging the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the regime. So we'll see what happens. I think that what Israel's doing is great. I hope they take the regime out. I hope that there's a regime change. I hope that the Iranian people have freedom and can return to their past glory, because they're really a glorious people. They deserve a lot of respect, but they're in a very dark place right now, and they've been in a dark place for a long time. In my opinion, they need to get rid of Islam. They need to get rid of this regime. They need to remember who they are, and because they've really become what they hate, and that's a sad reality. When you adopt the religion of your hated conquerors, you become just like them in your behavior. And the future, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Israel definitely has the superiority when it comes to intelligence. They've already had operatives deep inside of Iran that were helped pull off the missions that they set out for in these recent attacks, and that's why Iran didn't really retaliate with as many bombs as they could have, because Israel subdued a lot of them, right? So it'll be interesting to see what Israel did today. I think they just attacked them again. Hopefully the U.S. and the coalition of other countries join in and take this regime out, because it would be bad. It would be good for the world. It would be good for America. It would be good for the whole West. It would be, but most importantly, it would be good for the Iranian people, and that's what matters here. What matters here is that we liberate the Iranian people from this regime. I mean, it's a terrible regime. How they treat their people is morally reprehensible on so many fronts, and we as a world, really, I think, have an obligation to get rid of them, and I hope that we do. So hopefully Israel keeps on hitting them hard, and they're able to give up. It's interesting. I mean, if the regime really feels like they're in a do or die situation, they go into that mode. They may just try to get a nuclear weapon ready, or hit Israel harder, but who knows. So I'll keep you guys updated as things transpire, and I don't see this de-escalating anytime soon. But until more further notice, I'll be keeping you guys up to date with what's going on. All right.